So I moved for a 1-year contract for an NGO, and I didn't have any money when I moved to New Zealand, so I had to find a job. And so I found a job, and after 1 year, the contract came up. And because I came to New Zealand with this 1 year time frame in mind, right? I was like, I need to leave after a year. But everything was fine. I loved my paid job. My boss offered me another contract. And so literally every half a year, I would go through this, I need to leave now. Literally, I need to leave now. Like I said I would leave, right? And there was this fear of missing out, like something else I need to do. Until my boss suddenly said, why are you making decisions based on something you said in the past?
Hello, everybody. I'm Vasi Sarandopoulou, your trusted psychologist from Anti-Loneliness, and I support people who are struggling with their mental health, and I support them go from feeling that I had enough to I am enough. If you don't know that already, I have started the project here in YouTube, inviting interesting people that I like what they're doing, and they have interesting perspectives on life and mental health, and I invite them in these interviews that I call meaningful conversations. I like the meaningful part because we are actually adding a lot of meaning and interesting information for you when you're listening. So today I have a special guest. Her name is Simone Anzböck. Do I pronounce it correctly? I hope so. Yeah. She's a certified international coach. She supports ambitious international professionals who feel stuck in order to navigate the next chapter in career and life. She knows very well about the complexities and tensions of global life because she has worked and lived in over 15 countries. So she knows how to design and redesign that a career that suits our personal lifestyle and the dreams and the purpose that we want to have in life. So enough of me. At the moment, I would like to introduce Simone. Hi, Simone. Nice to see you here.
Hi, Vasya. Thanks so
Welcome.
much for having me. Yeah, lovely to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so curious to learn about your perspective because I am also in international and I know a little bit about international life. And I say a little bit because I have moved only to one country. In comparison to your 15 countries, that's nothing. But I have a slight idea about what it means to uproot yourself and then try to find new roots and new connections in a new country. So before we start with, before we go deep, tell us a few things about you, what you do, where you come from, where do you practice, and, some interesting facts about you.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks again for having me. And given that we talk about international life today and relocating and moving countries, I should probably give you a bit of background. So I'm Austrian originally. I'm born in Austria, but I consider myself a global citizen because I've moved abroad as soon as I could during university. As soon as I could afford it myself, I moved abroad. Lived in places as far as New Zealand, Myanmar, Zambia, so mainly kind of Europe, Africa, Asia. And I'm currently back in London. I relocated again last year in June. So I'm going through the whole repatriation, relocation experience all over again.
Oh wow! Oh wow! Yeah, I hear all these countries; they sound very exotic, but at the same time, I understand how difficult it is to relocate every once in a while, right? Something about you, something that people should know about you, something interesting, some experience that you would like to share.
Yeah, so I would probably say that I'm a language nerd. I wouldn't say I'm a polyglot. Like I'm not someone who easily learns languages, but I enjoy them. And the most exotic language I tried learning recently was Burmese, so the language in Myanmar. And for Europeans, that's very unusual because the script is different. And so it's the first time I learned a language where I actually had to learn a completely different script. It's a beautiful script. If you can Google it, it's a beautiful script, but it's so hard. And it just gave me a bit of humility again about all the languages that are out there and how much we can still learn and explore.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we have heard of, like the main languages that are being spoken on the planet, but actually the languages that we don't know are even more than those we
Yes.
have heard of. Or actually the population who's speaking the languages that we don't know is bigger than the population of the people who are talking the languages we know or we have heard of, the English, the Spanish, Italian, and etc. So you're focusing mainly on coaching international professionals through different personal and professional transitions. And most of these professionals that you're working with will have relocated at some point of their lives and might do it again. And I know from, of course, my personal experience, but also my own clients who, because I'm working also with internationals on the mental health services, I know that our mental health is suffering sometimes through these transitions. So from your experience as an international coach, what are the main challenges for the mental health for people when they relocate?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question, because I think you go through that and you probably don't realize, but I think the main challenge is the simple thing of change. And probably you've talked about this before on your channel, is that our brain does not like change. And so that's the simple thing. Our brain avoids any change. But there's also areas in our brain that are a bit like our internal GPS, like in the temporal lobe. There are certain areas for a social GPS or physical GPS. I call it GPS, but that's probably a good reference. And so if you think about relocating, all of that is gone, right? Your social GPS, your support networks are gone in the beginning. Your physical disorientated, right? So there's everything is basically new, and we can't rely on anything. And I think that just all at once throws us off the most. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I like what you mentioned about the brain. For me, the brain is a machine, and it has a software, and the software has specific guidelines. Anything that is outside the software is something that our brain doesn't like doing. So anything outside of our comfort zone, it makes sense why our brain says, well, we don't have guidelines for that. We don't have a software for that. Abort. We don't go there. We don't do that. Our brain always brings us back into the familiar, or wants to bring us back into the familiar. And it's because we take the steering wheel, we drive ourselves out of the comfort zone, because we know that this is where the growth is. So it's a constant battle of, like the familiar and the growth.
And I think what I would probably say to that is that when you plan your relocation, or when you plan to move, right, you're excited, it's this kind of new adventure. Everybody tells you how exciting it's going to be, and you are looking forward to it. And then that change, you're kind of overriding that idea of that change in that moment, right? Because you're looking forward to it. But then you move, and the first 6 months mostly is when this happens. Suddenly you're like there, and your brain caught up and realizes that, oh my God, there's change. And that's when the adaptation period, there's like a curve almost that you can kind of, there's a dip. There's always a dip, a post-relocation dip. And if you're aware of it, you can kind of work with it and get support you need.
I think that's a very good point. And it helps a lot with managing expectations, because you know that in the beginning you're going to be so enthusiastic. You like everything. All this, adrenaline, because you are driving a new vehicle, you're meeting new people. Everybody likes you. Everybody treats you nicely. Everybody excuses you for not speaking the language. Everything is nice, at least for some people, and not for everybody. But then, as we said, there's a reality check. There's a moment when things will start to become real and difficult. And what happens then with our mental health then? What have you noticed?
I think, there's a dip. Like, I've been through it multiple times. Multiple times. And I see this with my clients too. There is this dip that might, as you said, it might come immediately, or it might come after a few years, right? When you might not have invested in building a social network, or you have, I would probably say that there's a few things happening when people live international lives. One is that at some point you think the world is your oyster, right? Like you can do anything, So, but it's that vastness of opportunities that can make you feel, am I missing out? Is there something else that I should be doing? There is the comparing to others. I do think that we don't have any guardrails when we live an international life, because you're taking yourself out of your own culture, so out of your own environment, out of your own family, and so there's no one to really compare yourself to. Your journey is unique, and I think that's really hard to make sense of for us. I also think that's when, over time, I call them tensions can arise. That kind of like there's a trade-off that you feel, there are tensions that you feel, and maybe at that point something doesn't feel right anymore, and it's time to reevaluate.
And the reevaluating, I think for some people, from my experience, it comes at the point, as you said, maybe a year or 5 years or 10 years later. And for some of the people, it is a constant. Like, I noticed that there are some people that they are always with one foot out of the door. They're constantly reevaluating. Did I make the right decision? Do I really want to stay here? Do I want to live somewhere else? Do I want to go back home? They're constantly thinking. And I have a specific example of a lady that I met many years ago. We were living in the same city back then. And I remember visiting her house. And even though she was living in that city for 5 years already, she still had boxes in her living room. So I asked her, like, yeah, why are you keeping your things in boxes still? And she was like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I will need to, leave. I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to stay or leave. Maybe I'm going to leave. And then we were talking, like about relationships. And she was telling me how she liked one person, and she was thinking, whether we can be together. And then when I asked her, like, what are your, hesitation? What is your hesitation about? And she's like, yeah, what if I leave? I don't want to start a relationship and then decide that I would leave. So this constant reevaluating and hesitating and not allowing yourself to be in one place can have this limbo, like you are constantly in between places. And in reality, you're nowhere. You don't belong in any of these.
That's the other side of the coin.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I on that, and I've been there, right? Like I remember when I moved to New Zealand in 2006. So I moved for a 1-year contract for an NGO, and I didn't have any money when I moved to New Zealand, so I had to find a job. And so I found a job, and after 1 year, the contract came up. And because I came to New Zealand with this 1 year time frame in mind, right? I was like, I need to leave after a year. But everything was fine. I loved my paid job. My boss offered me another contract. And so literally every half a year, I would go through this, I need to leave now. Literally, I need to leave now. Like I said I would leave, right? And there was this fear of missing out, like something else I need to do. Until my boss suddenly said, why are you making decisions based on something you said in the past, right? So at that point, and that's also something I tell my clients all the time, and that's something I live by right now. At that point, I decided to settle. And to settle for now, not to settle forever, but to settle for now. And that was like 2 years in living in New Zealand. I bought myself my first furniture item. Can you imagine that? Like I lived without furniture for like not my own, like other people's furniture for 2 years. And from that moment on, I decided, okay, I move somewhere. Whether or not I stay there for a year or two, I'm settling. I'm buying myself what I want, my plants, even if it's secondhand, like furniture. And then the time comes, I need to move. I move. But so I would recommend everybody to basically just decide right now that you're settling where you are. It doesn't necessarily mean you're letting go of opportunities to move elsewhere again. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That's fantastic, Sip. Yeah, because being in between places and considering all the time, shall I stay, shall I leave? Not only it doesn't allow you to enjoy what you have there at that moment, it not only doesn't allow you to grab the opportunities which are being offered to you at that moment, but also it's a heavy, heavy burden on your mental health. You're constantly thinking, you're losing your sleep, this or that, A or B, leave, stay, constantly thinking, which is, of course, something that we need to be mindful how we treat our mental health. Without knowing, we can find ourselves with anxiety or with a burnout because of this constant overthinking. Absolutely. So I
Yeah.
agree with what you said. Before you leave, stay.
And
Before you leave, stay. Yeah, just stay. I know at some
I
point
really love that. Yeah.
yeah. You
And I
will
would probably
leave.
put, sorry.
Sorry,
I just want,
go.
I just wanted, I just wanted to say that one thing that you really mentioned, which is such a good point. I think once we decide to settle for now, or like, you stay for now, I think energetically something happens. You can actually see the opportunities, right? So with your friend, right, or the colleague that you had, with the relationship, right, she might actually decide, like, I see where this goes, right? Like, I met my partner in London 7 years ago now. I did never plan to stay in London forever. We then moved together to Myanmar, right? So how do you know what life's going to throw at you, right? So give yourself the chance to look at opportunities where you are. That doesn't prevent you from doing anything else afterwards. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah. Exactly. And I like the question which you said, but it's so important and I want to repeat it. How do you know what's going to happen in the future? That's also one of the limitations of our brain. Our brain doesn't know what will happen in the future, but our brain pretends that it knows what will happen in the future. So this is when we go into our thinking like, I know if I stay here, I will miss out on opportunities back home, or I will never be able to leave this place. So all these explanations that our brain give, which are not necessarily true. So the reality is that we don't know what the future will bring. Never, ever, ever. Nobody can tell us what the future will bring. And any attempt of our brain to tell us that, I know what will happen to you, you're going to fail, I know what will happen to you, you're going to regret it. No, that's not true. You don't know. You don't
I
know.
agree. Yeah, we don't know. And it might be better than you imagined.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. So you also said another word which I really like, FOMO.
Yes, the fear of missing out.
Yes. So what happens there? What are we afraid that we're going to miss out? Is that about the opportunities that you said?
I do think I think for people that live internationally, I think there's so many factors that play into that, but I've kind of boiled it down to a few. One is once you start living an international life, right, and you've moved maybe even just once, right, you kind of get that itch for like, oh, right, I've done this once. What else, right? So where else can I go? So there's this element of the world is our oyster. I struggled with that a lot, like it still is. World is our oyster. So all these opportunities. So everything seems possible, which obviously not everything is possible in one life. The comparison syndrome. So we have that still. You live your international life, but you might have friends back home from your school or from university. They now have, I don't know, a house. In my case, they have a house and children, and have the mortgage, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't have that, right? So it's that comparing. So the fear of missing out is that our life diverges. I always say our life diverges, I think, as soon as we are in university, right? From our school friends, if you look at your school friends, you're going to have multitude of avenues. And that's where I think the fear of missing out comes in. And the fear of better options, FOBO, right? The fear that we are missing out on a better option. So
wow.
I think that's a big one.
And what kind of better, you said better options, right? Fear of better options?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That there's somewhere else there are better options.
Yeah, like imagine you need to decide or want to decide on a job that you have in front of right now. So this is the option that you have, right? Someone offers you a job, but you go, well, but what if there is another option that is better? Or even you might think about it's a bit like the opportunity cost element. But this FOMO, fear of missing out, I feel is more a general term. And the fear of better option for me is more like, well, maybe, like I should really wait for a better option rather than committing or deciding for the one that is in front of me.
Yeah. And I think that reminds me of what you said before about your, was it your boss that said, who told you that you have to
Yeah.
be here only for 1 year. I think the FOMO and the FOBO, what you mentioned, is highly related with the should and the must that we have in our head.
Hmm.
I should have a house by now. I should have a family, or I must be happy in that specific way because other people are happy in that specific way, which takes away also being present in the present moment and enjoying what I have. I just
Mm.
compare myself constantly to what I should have had, and I don't have it, and I don't enjoy what I have now.
Yeah, I think that's basically the antidote, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a way, it's the antidote for me is looking inward, as you said, right? It's like going away from the should, or the need, or the must, even for some people, and looking inward to actually say, okay, what do I want, right? Like
Yeah.
I, for myself, have long decided I don't want a house with a mortgage because I like my freedom to be able to move around, right?
Yeah.
Or just not have that anchor, right? So, but for other people, it works, right? So, what? So there's no also societal expectations, right? So it's about going away from the external and really getting to know yourself better and what actually you want, right? How you want to design your life.
Yeah. 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 So is the root of these fears, the fear of missing out or the fear of better options, um, is the root the fact that we don't know ourselves very well, or we don't know what gives joy to our life?
I would love to hear your view on that. Um,
Mm,
I would say yes to that. I do think there is an element of the more we know ourselves, the more we look inwards, the better we, I think, can distinguish what works for us and what doesn't. But I also think that with social media and like, the internet is at our fingertips, which also see so many other things, right? We see so many options, how other people live their life. And I also think there's a certain conditioning that
mm.
happens. Even if you think about the Disney movies that we watched as a child, right? Like, oh, the prince will come and he will, buy you this house. I mean, this kind of conditioning starts early on, right? And I think it's there, and
Yeah.
yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think, I mean, cultural or family pressure can be
Mm,
an important element here. Like, when you hear your parents talking about this must and should
mm,
all the time, when are you going to have kids? When are you going to buy your house? You're already 40, you're already, 30, whatever the age. It makes sense why we internalize these rules and we think that they are universal
mm,
laws that we should abide by. So I think that's one reason. And the other one is what I said before, knowing ourselves and knowing our values.
mm,
So you say that we have the world on our fingertips with the social media, and we see so many
mm,
images of what other people's lives look like, and we want to have that, and all the shiny objects that come in our screen. But the filter that we need between us and these images is our values. So I
mm,
see, somebody who has I don't know, a 5 million house, and it looks fantastic, but then I may very easily fall into the trap that believing that this is what I want if I don't know what I want. I
yeah.
may find myself working really hard in order to have the same house or the
Mm,
very luxury, let's say, vacation. I may fall into the trap of working really hard in order to have that just because other people have it. But then, if I look into myself, if I look into my values, what it is that I appreciate, what it is
mm,
that I appreciate in my life and prioritize. Like what you said, like I figure out that I value freedom,
mm,
and that changed everything. I don't want to
exactly.
have a 5 million house somewhere on the planet and get stuck there, even though it's a 5 million house. I don't want to, I appreciate more to spend my money, enjoying what I have here, or enjoying my relationship with my partner, or whatever it is that I enjoy and gives me joy. And that's the filter between me and the rest of the world. From all these things that I see, all these shiny objects that I see, what is it that I value most?
Yeah, I can only agree
Yeah,
on that, Marcia.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think you
yeah, yeah, yeah,
articulated
yeah,
that
yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Another thing that I'm thinking about, my company is called anti-loneliness. So I work a lot with loneliness. I study loneliness. I read a lot about that, and we talk about loneliness with my clients as well. And I've seen in people who are relocating, of course, a fair share of loneliness in their lives because they're lacking the family support, their friends are not there, they have to reinvent their social connections. So I wonder whether this lack of family support, the lack also of this familiarity that everything is new here, the homesickness because you are nostalgic about your home country, and this loneliness, whether this plays also a role in the FOMO that we said before. I'm afraid of missing out because back then something is happening, but then I'm missing it out.
Yeah, it would. I can only answer that maybe from a personal perspective, and you obviously also have clients. I have clients. I guess from a personal perspective, for me, homesickness was never really the concern, right? For me, the support structure was a concern. So for me, it was having people that I feel close to, that I can have a conversation with, that are there for me. And that might be these days, over the years, actually, not even these days, over the years, I realized it don't have to be physical there, right? Like I still have my friends from childhood, my friend from childhood. We know each other since we're 6. She's still my closest friend. We leave each other WhatsApp messages. I know what's going on in her life. So it's kind of like knowing how to build a support network, whether it is your family, right? If you know that family is important to you and you want to see them physically a lot, making that plan for that, right? So I think it's a support structure more general that I think is an important factor. And Vasi, I'm sure you know this. I saw these statistics the other day that the older we get, generally, right, the more time we spend by ourselves. And then I guess the loneliness curve, right, goes up. And I think that's even higher for people that live internationally because you're kind of taking yourself out of it. But knowing that's generally the case, that we need to learn to be with ourselves, need to learn how to build new support structures as we age anyway. I think if you think about that as an international, you can become more resilient because you have learned how to do that, right? You have literally learned how to rebuild your life in a new location. So you can do that again and again.
Yeah.
I think that's a positive side of it.
Yeah. That's building resilience. Absolutely. Yeah. And what you said, as the older we get, the more time we spend alone. I say the same thing, but from a slightly different perspective, which is the older we get, the more time it takes us to build a relationship, a new relationship, which comes naturally, knowing that the more we grow older, the more hurt we experience from relationships. And the more hurt we are from relationships, the more we want to protect ourselves, the more we want to take our time in order to build trust. We want to go slowly. We're not building relationships over a beer and a party anymore. We want to test, and we want to see whether it's safe for us. So that's also something that we need to take into consideration and manage expectations to a realistic level, that going in a new country doesn't mean that the next week you're going to have a bunch of friends really connected with them. It will take some time. Everybody's testing the water. Everybody is trying to manage their life, but also their social connections. And everybody is threading lightly there and trying to create relationships who are safe for themselves. So keep that for everybody who's listening, to keep it in mind that relationships, as we grow older, are created in a slower pace, steadily, but in a slower pace, and we need to be more patient.
Yes, and what I would add to that is that imagine, like, if you think back at the times when you went to university or in school, how you made friends was because you hung out more, right? So that's where a lot of us still have friends from universities and school, because you naturally had to hang out so much, during classes or afterwards. So that one tip I probably would give people that move abroad, instead of trying to meet everybody and meeting new people every day, like, of course, meet new people, but at the same time evaluate for you, okay, is this a person I would like to hang out more? And then make a conscious effort to try to invest in a few people, like, and basically the idea of hang out with them more, because that's how a relationship forms, right? Rather than seeing them every week at a party and you speak 5 words, right? Invest consciously, and reevaluate, is this a relationship that I want to build, or I want to meet new people? I think that's what I would add to what you said.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Consciously, intentionally go in the relationship and give it a good chance. Give it a good chance. Not like one time off, like, oh, that's your only opportunity to prove to me that you will be a good friend. And then, oh, you missed your opportunity. That's it. We're done. No, give it a good chance, because people are revealing part of themselves very slowly. Good tip. Good tip. Any other tip on how? Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to add one there, which I read the other day, which I think it's a really useful thing to know from research. There's what's called a liking gap, meaning that we think, if we meet a new person, that we think they like us less than they actually do. So that's called the liking gap. So we all have it. So if we would meet on the street or in a networking event, you and me at the same time will probably have, oh my God, you might not like me, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you know that, you can know, this is a proven research-based fact. You can go into a meeting, or you can go into meeting new people and actually say, I know about this. I assume that Vasya will like me actually more than I think she does. And that makes, I think, the first approach, meeting new people, a lot easier.
Yeah. Wow, great insight. I love it. Any other tip how we can overcome these fears of connecting or missing out or not being present?
I think it comes down to what you said before, and I say this to my clients all the time as well, turning inwards more, right? So tuning out a lot of the external noise, like social media, like constantly busy doing things. I think there is a space for us to just take more quiet time. And journaling, I think, is an excellent way for that. But really finding a practice that works for you, where you can process and, as we said, turn inward, look at your values, let those values come up, right? In a relocation, or when you live overseas, some of those just come up suddenly in unexpected moments. When there is tension, you realize, oh, I actually don't, I value freedom, for example, right? Yeah. I discovered that during my journey. I didn't set out like that,
No.
So I think that the reflection practice, turning inward practice, I think, is an important one for us to get to know ourselves better.
Yeah. And I love what you said. I didn't know that this was a value that I had in my life. I figured it out in the process. And that's already a tip inside the tip. Allow the process to teach you, who you are. It's not like you have to take a book and go to the park and find yourself. No, it's through the experiences that we are learning ourselves. Fantastic. Tip inside the tip. I'm sure that you have also met people who are really processing very well their relocating process. And they are adjusting, and they are mindful, and they are really with both feet inside this journey, and they're enjoying it. And at the same time, their partner doesn't. So what they are struggling with is not themselves, but their partner, who doesn't feel like this is the right choice, who feels like maybe we should go back, or maybe we should try something else. They don't get out of the comfort zone. They don't meet friends. They're always bringing this conversation at the table. Do we really want to stay? Shall we buy a house? Because maybe we will go. So then, even though one person is looking forward, the other one is looking backwards, or is just stagnating, right? You've met that,
yes,
I'm sure.
I've met it. Well, I've not been exactly in that situation, but yes, I have been in a situation where I moved from my partner's job, and he went to work the next day, and I was at home. I've given up my job. It was before COVID too, just about when COVID hit. And like I was in this new place, like not really knowing. And I had the moment where we literally diverged as a couple of like he settling, he being at work, he having a social network because of the fact he went to work. He had a purpose. Well, I was like, I just moved here and I'm alone all day and my partner's at work. What do I do? So I can totally relate, not necessarily directly to that example that you had, but
yeah.
So I think in both cases, there is communication. That's probably what I would say, right? The fact that only because you've moved together or you've relocated together, your experiences are not the same because of everything we said in this call already, right? How you've grown up, what conditioning you have experienced, what values you might live, right? A couple can still have different individual values, right? Like as people.
True.
Those come up, right? These are literally being thrown up in the surface in the most unexpected ways when you decide to start a new chapter abroad. So the problem number one is communication. I'm also saying, don't be afraid to get couple help, right? I'm very open about the fact that couple therapy together as a couple can really be helpful to, to, how do you say,
Align.
separate. Yes, align and separate
Align.
what's mine, what's ours.
Yeah.
And really like almost like jointly designing, and maybe that's the start then, even if you are in this situation, right? It's difficult to start, what do we want together, right? Like what's our values as a couple, and then find a way, right?
Yes.
I don't think there's a one size fits all solution on this, but I'm hoping this is insightful, maybe, and I'd love to hear your view on how you would approach it as a couple, really.
Yeah. I mean, I am a couples therapist, and I've been in situations like that when the couple, the partners, they're looking at a different direction, and it can be either about the decision of whether they should move to another place or not, or it can be even about other issues such as, do we want to have kids, do we want to buy a house, and one is strong yes and the other one is strong no. So how do you align in there, or how do you bring the connection even though there's a different perspective and a different opinion? So I think what you said first is very important, the communication. Even just talking about your fears to your partner, I'm all alone at home and I'm thinking, what if that, what if this, and your partner listening to that is already a big comfort. And for some couples, it already bridges the gap that they have. Because it's different if you think that I want to go back home and my partner doesn't listen and doesn't understand me. And it's different if you think that I want to go back home, but thank God my partner listens and understands me. It's a completely different situation. So starting with the communication and being open and transparent, I think that's key.
Yeah. And to add to that, understanding that both sides need to understand that their experiences will likely be different, right? Only because you've been on the same plane and you live in the same place, your inner process of what's happening is different, like how often have you done this before? Where do you come from? What's your worldview? You're not going to process it the same way. And I think an acknowledgement of that within the relationship, I think, is also important.
Exactly. Very important. Acknowledging that we have different perspectives and accepting that we have a different way of coping.
Yes.
If you want to stay at home the first few months and grieve or find yourself, it's fine. I'm not going to blame you. I'm not going to come back and say, hey, why don't you go out and meet some friends? I don't like seeing you here being miserable. No, I'm accepting that you're coping with that in a different way, and that's perfectly fine. Fantastic. Any exercise that you would like to share for our listeners and watchers?
Yeah. So I think it comes down. I think that it sounds possibly simple, but actually I find it really impactful with a lot of my clients. Is the coming back to the reflection practice. And if you have not heard about this, I'm sure you do. Vasya, is the practice called the morning pages. And it's for people that might not have a regular journaling practice, but it literally works like this. You just take 2 empty pieces of paper every morning, sit down for 30 minutes, and you just write. Literally, you write whatever comes down for 30 minutes. And then after those 30 minutes, you just discard the 2 pages and you never read them again. And I think it's a real cathartic kind of process, partly because there's no evaluation. You just dump everything that's in your head out there. And I think there's something beautiful that works just by taking what's in your head on paper, even though it doesn't make any sense. I think something happens in your brain. I can't explain it. I'm not a neuroscientist. That like makes it sense for you after a while. So I think that if you want to try it out for 2 weeks. It will get easier with time, and don't evaluate. Just write whatever comes out, whether it's a shopping list or whatever thoughts come up about just happening in your life. Just try it.
Wow, I can see why you call it a cathartic process. I can see that because we walk around constantly judging ourselves. So taking 2 pages and start writing something without thinking, what if somebody finds it? And what if I turn that into a blog article? What if I'm not writing something, correctly? Well, I don't like the typo. Oh, how do you spell this word? Without thinking anything,
Correct.
it's already a liberating act for our brain. You can do whatever you do, honey. Nobody's judging for this half an hour. It's you and your thoughts. And the second element of this mental liberation is when you take the chaos that we have in our heads and we just put it on the paper instead of keeping it here. It's because the brain thinks that, oh, I don't want you to forget, right? So it keeps all this information here, but that's very heavy and taxing for our mental health again. So that's great. That's great. Let's see how our audience will practice that and what will be their feedback.
There is, you can link that possibly if you want to in the show notes. There is a book, don't know the author now, but it's literally called The Morning Pages. I can find the name of the author as well, and we can link it, which explains the process for people that want to, learn more about that idea. Perfect.
So before I forget, let me put your LinkedIn profile here, because for those who are listening, you want to connect with Simone and listen to more of these insightful and interesting tips she gives almost daily on LinkedIn. I like your posts. I see they're very engaging and very to the point. So have a look at her LinkedIn, Simone Anzböck. And because we also met via LinkedIn.
We did. I love what you posted.
Really grateful. I'm feeling really grateful for LinkedIn. I've met fantastic people. Yes. Yeah. So would you like to wrap it up? What are the most important things that we just said today? And what do you think that our audience should just take away as a message from our conversation today?
Yeah, like it's literally I put some scribbles down as you were speaking about like, oh, we should come back to it at the end of the session. One was the point around settling down. So you can take a decision right now where you are to settle down. You're not excluding any opportunities in a couple of years' time, even in a couple of months' time. Settle down, go with the flow, take the opportunities, and also see what opportunities comes up just by you taking that decision right now. Yeah. The second thing is the lacking gap, right? Because as we live internationally, generally we want to meet new people. So think about, remember the fact that research proves that we have that idea or think that other people like us less than they actually do. So if you know that there is this liking gap, you can go into a room, you can meet new people, assuming they like you better than you think they do. That's maybe number 2. And number 3 I wrote down is the idea that generally it's also proven by research that people that live abroad for a longer period of time do get a clearer sense of self. So they have a clearer sense of self. And because they are going to reevaluate automatically what they believe, what's their values, they're kind of thrown into the deep end. And you can support that by making space for reflection, by making space for giving yourself the time to process things, seeing how life has changed for you, and what's important to you, what's not important to you.
Absolutely.
That's probably the 3 from today.
Yes. To be honest, I'm 9.5 years now in the Netherlands. And I have this feeling, this newly founded feeling of gratitude every day since I moved here,
Mm.
for the environment, for the people that I've met, for the person that I've become, and I had no idea that I would become that person, for the opportunities, for the
Mm.
challenges as well. Of course, there would be challenges back home, but here there are another set of challenges. But for all these things, I am grateful for all these opportunities that I've had here. And as you said, you get to meet yourself to a deeper level the more you live in this world, the more you experience different
Mm.
perspectives, different people, different cultures.
Correct. Yeah. And the depth of the experience matters, actually, Basia. So the fact that you lived for such a long time in the Netherlands already, it's not how many countries you live in, actually. It's how long you stay in a certain country that
Yeah.
supports that.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm very
Yeah, thank you.
grateful for you being here.
Thank you
And
for
I
having me
would,
on your conversation.
of course, of course. And I would love, like if this conversation would help somebody who's struggling with their relocation, and if they really would like some more help from you, and they found your words really helpful, I would love if they could connect with you and they will take the help that they need. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And until our next meaningful conversation, take good care of yourself.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.